So we begin this third week of Lent. So we're just about hitting the halfway point, actually, of Lent. And the last couple of weeks, if anybody remembers, probably not, but you might. During the homily, we've been talking about the Station of the Cross, and we've done the first four. And it's interesting how each week the Gospel, in particular, has lined up very much with the Station of the Cross that we're starting with that particular week. It was that way in the first week and the second week, and also is that way this week. Obviously, we're on the fifth station. Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry his cross. And the sixth station, Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Obviously, we have to do them in pairs because we don't have enough time to do each one individually, unless you guys want to have a Lent that lasts for 8 months. But with that being said, there's this common thread running through the readings today in the gospel, and it has to do with this thirst that a person feels. In the first reading, we have the Israelites who are always complaining during the entire time in the desert that they're dying of thirst, although they're not. And God gives them water from the rock. He satisfies their physical, biological thirst. In the second reading, Paul tells us about satisfying this deeper thirst, which is satisfied by the grace of God. And in the third, the gospel, we have Jesus confronting this earthly thirst, but also making us aware of the more important thirst that should be satisfied, which is thirst for God. So he's talking with this woman at the well, and the Samaritan, and this is interesting in and of itself. You can see how shocked she is that he asks her for a drink because, as it says, Samaritans and Jews share nothing in common. For the Jews, the Samaritans are literally lower than dogs. The Samaritans are the lowest of the low, and that's partially because they have a common ancestor, and they didn't go the same way as the Jews went. So they literally share nothing. You do not use a cup a Samaritan used. You do not use a fork a Samaritan used. You do not use a chair a Samaritan used. Nothing. You are separated because they are less than. And the Jews, a lot of them, believe that they're the only ones that God loves and they're the ones God's going to save. So anybody else is not worth the time of day. And so this is why she's shocked when Christ even says, "Give me a drink of water." How can you, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan, for a drink of water? That's unheard of. It doesn't happen. What Christ is doing is he's trying to lead her down that road of faith. And so first he approached it through that physical, biological need of water. She's out there to draw water. And he tells her that the water you're drawing, basically, it's not going to satisfy the thirst that you have down inside. It'll satisfy your physical thirst, sure, but you'll be thirsty again. Says, I know of the water that will satisfy, and you never have to thirst again. And she's still not grasping what he's saying, I think, as most of us probably wouldn't in that situation. Like, so give me that water so I don't ever have to come back to the well. Very physically minded. Like, again, like a lot of us get caught up in that trap, and Christ leads her a little further. And finally, awakens within her this desire for faith, for God, to such an extent that the very reason she went to the well in the first place was to draw water. He's gotten so deep in bringing this faith up, this desire to know God in her, that she leaves the water jug at the well to go back and tell the people in the town whom she's met. The physical thirst is gone. Something deeper has been satisfied. And we all experience physical thirst. You know, without food, you can live for quite a while, at least a month, sometimes longer than that. Water, I believe, is 12 to 14 days. You can live without satisfying the biological need for water. And so we've all experienced thirst to some extent, but there's that deeper thirst we've also experienced that things will satisfy temporarily or partially. That's why we keep going on to different things. That's why we have to have new things and go new places and all these things, because we're trying to satisfy this thirst we have inside. That's one of the reasons, some people get addicted to things because it's satisfied, at least to an extent, a thirst they had inside, and they have to keep going back to that same place because that satisfaction doesn't last. They have to keep trying to refresh it. We know that nothing we experience on this earth totally satisfies us. That's why we say, it was a good day or a good week, or the lucky ones, they've had a good year. But it's always up and down. We all have that addictive personality that we're always trying to satiate that deeper thirst. So we keep going back to things or people or places, hoping it'll do it this time, knowing it won't take away that thirst. It'll just cover it up for a few minutes. And that's how people get addicted to things. It hid that thirst they had for those few minutes, and they thought this is the relief they want. It comes back, they have to go back to the same source again. And Jesus is telling us in the gospel that he's the only one who can satisfy that thirst. So we have to go to him with this. And so How does this tie into the stations of the cross, especially the fifth one that we're dealing with first? Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry his cross. Well, hopefully we'll show you that in a moment. Simon of Cyrene. It's an interesting character. Now, his last name is not Cyrene. He's not Mr. Simon Cyrene. Cyrene is the country he's from. Simon is not from Jerusalem. Cyrene is a place close to where what we would call modern day Libya. So about 900 miles from Jerusalem. That would take roughly between 4 and 5 weeks to travel there, depending on how fast or slow your camel or donkey were moving at that moment. 4 to 5 weeks and 900 miles. A dangerous and expensive and taxing journey. Tradition tells us that Simon is in Jerusalem because he's a Jew and he's there to celebrate the Passover. Because according to Jewish law, everyone had to make the attempt to at least once in their lives celebrate the Passover in the holy city of Jerusalem. It was a requirement. At least once in your life, you had to do that. And so this is what tradition tells us Simon is there for, to celebrate that Passover. He's traveled 900 miles to get there. And Simon has a family on top of that, so his family's come too. It's an insanely expensive and dangerous journey to undertake. And we know he's only there temporarily. He's trying to make some money as well to help support his family while he's in town, because the Passover also is not cheap to celebrate. You have to pay for lodging in a place that's filled with pilgrims. So the prices are definitely not in the basement. So he's got to pay for that. You have to buy a paschal lamb. It has to be one bought at that point in time from the temple area. You have to have the money to buy the ingredients to make the unleavened bread and the bitter herbs and all these things. Then you had to have money to be able to travel back 900 miles to Cyrene. Because one of the Gospels tells us Simon's just coming in from the field. He was working. He's trying to make some money while he's there to help support this holy day that him and his family are having and their trip back. And so what does this mean? This is important because this means Simon really has no idea what's going on in Jerusalem, at least for the most part. He's probably heard some whisperings here and there about somebody who's going to be crucified, possibly heard his name, Jesus, but he really has no idea what's going on. And that's evidenced by the fact that Simon somehow walks right into this procession of Christ carrying this cross. It says Simon's returning from the fields. He has no idea. He doesn't know Jerusalem, so he's just trying to find the best way back to where him and his family are staying. And he walks into this crowd. So again, first plan destroyed. He's not getting home anytime soon. Crowd of shouting, people throwing stones and spitting upon and insulting Jesus. And again, he's probably heard a little bit about who this is, but he knows very little. It really doesn't bother. It's not his business, is what he's thinking. This is not my problem. I'm not even from here. He just wants to get back home because the Passover begins that evening. So he has to go home, get cleaned up, and prepare when they slaughter the Paschal lamb that evening. And it's already midday. So he has a lot of things to do. So he's trying to get home. He's probably taking the shortest way that he knows through the city, and he runs smack dab into this procession. And again, it tells us he's not from there because if he was from there, he would have known. Whenever they're processing up to Calvary, they would always take the same way. And Simon is not aware of this. That's why he walks into him. So he's there, and to his bad luck, I guess you'd say at that time, he's chosen by the Roman soldier to help carry this cross. The Roman soldiers, as a rule, because they're the victors, the conquerors, they could take anyone from the crowd anywhere and force them to carry whatever burden they wanted them to carry for at least 1,000 paces. This is why in the gospel Jesus says, if somebody forced you to go 1,000 paces, go 2,000. It's tying into that. The Roman soldiers had that privilege. Anybody. So you're going to carry the armor, or you're going to carry the water jug, or you're going to feed my horse. You're going to do this for 1,000 paces. They had that right. It was law. Simon would have known that because Rome ruled Africa too, and Libya and all these places. And so he gets snatched out of the crowd to help this convict carry his own instrument of torture. And again, it tells us the depravity of these people who are trying to kill Christ, that they need to make sure that he doesn't die on the way. Because he's supposed to die by crucifixion. They want to make sure that they're the ones who kill him and make an example of him. So they pluck somebody out of the crowd to carry the cross for the most part, the majority of the weight now, because Christ is falling and stumbling under it. And he's been beaten so horribly. This is the mindset of these people. We need to make sure he's alive at least long enough so that we can crucify him. This is why they pull Simon out. And Simon gets plucked out of the crowd, probably because he's a laborer, so he looks like he can carry heavy burdens, and he's already dirty from being out in the fields. And he's told, you have to do this. Now put yourself in Simon's place. He doesn't know this man. He doesn't really know what's going on, and he definitely doesn't want to be carrying a convict's cross. Simon wants to go home and get ready for the Passover. That's all he wants. He's done a long day's work, and so the indignation he would have being chosen from that crowd that he wasn't a part of from the beginning, that he has no he doesn't even want to stay there, he's just trying to get through, and now he has to walk the whole way up Calvary. Imagine how indignant he would be. Why are you making me do this? I'm not involved in this. This is not my business. I don't care. The example I was using the other day, and people understood it, was, let's say it's Saturday evening, and good, slow old Father Anthony has to get down to Langsburg after Mass here in Ovid. Mass here ends at 5 o'clock, and I get out by 5:10, usually if I'm lucky. Mass in Langsburg starts at 5:30. So 55 is the starting point of the speed limit. And that's like when you hit here, then you can keep going. But that's the idea, right? I'm not going to say how fast I go. I'm not going to self-incriminate here. But let's just say 55 is where we start accelerating. And I'm heading down there because, again, usually I have 15 minutes maybe to get down there, get ready, make sure everything's ready, and start Mass. And let's say there's a car in the road that has a flat tire. The police are out there stopping everybody. And there's 18 farmers with John Deeres and International harvesters and case tractors in the field standing by. And they stop me and say, well, you need to help this guy change his tire. I got places to go, man. I'm late as it is, and I need to get where I need to go. I have a place to be. This is not part of my plan to stop here. Plus, you got 18 guys standing over here who are involved in the situation. Make one of them do it. They're doing nothing. I don't know this person. I don't know who they are. I don't know what's going on. I'm just trying to get through because I have somewhere I need to be. How would you feel if that was you? That's how Simon is feeling right now. He's not involved. There's all these other people around. I'm not even from this area. I have places I need to be. Why are you making me do this? So indignant. This is not right. But yet he has to. He has no choice now. He's been forced by the Romans to do this. And so there's a couple of consequences of this, though. Number one, he's going to get somebody else's blood all over him because Christ is bleeding profusely. He's going to hurt himself by having to carry this cross, and he also has to help support Christ as they're walking. So not only does he have to carry a convict's burden, he has to get a convict's blood all over him, and also help a convict get to the place where they want to kill him at. That's not what you want to experience after a long day of work. Number two is, now he's going to have guilt by association. Well, who were you to this Nazarene that you were there with him? Why were you there? Nobody's going to believe him. The Romans made me do it. You must be a friend of his. And he's the most hated guy in Jerusalem right now. Simon has to contend with that. So even you can imagine, he might have even experienced for a moment contempt or even hatred for what he had to do, and a disgust and a disdain even for Christ when he first started. I don't know this man, and I shouldn't have to be here, and this is not my burden. But there's one other aspect we forget, and people seldom think about. Simon being a Jew, there's laws in Judaism, especially at that time, that govern whether or not you'd be able to celebrate the Passover. To become ritually unclean disqualifies you from celebration of the Passover unless you have so many days before it happens to purify yourself. Simon has traveled 900 miles in 5 weeks to celebrate the Passover in Jerusalem with his family. This is why he's there. Now he's carrying a convict's cross. He has a convict's blood on him. And because of this, he has now been made unclean. And he can no longer celebrate the Passover with his family. The only reason he's there in the first place has now been ripped out of his hands. So again, think about what's going through his mind at this moment. 900 miles, all that time, family and friends are there, and he has to stay outside of where they celebrate the Passover. He's not allowed to be in the presence of it because now he's unclean. He's touched something the pagans touched, the cross. Remember when the Pharisees take Jesus to Pilate They will not even enter the room Pilate is in for fear of making themselves unclean. You cannot touch anything of the pagans, or else you become unclean, and therefore you could not celebrate the Passover. If you touch anything belonging to a dead body, you cannot celebrate the Passover. He's carrying the cross of a dead man. So Simon is disqualified from the only reason he went to Jerusalem in the first place. So again, imagine the indignation and contempt and hatred he would feel. But just like the woman at the well, first Christ has to contend with this lack of understanding of who he is, even this contempt from almost, who are you, a Jew, to ask me, a Samaritan? Simon is saying, why do I have to help this convict? But something happens after this. Simon walks with him, again, over half the way up to Calvary, gets him up there, tosses the cross on the ground, helps Christ at least get up there to where they can nail him to a cross. Simon knows what's going to happen to him now. He's seen how he's been treated. He understands what's going on. And this time he spent with Christ, as far as we know, nothing was said between them. But even that time spent with Christ was enough to awaken within Simon the desire for that living water Christ speaks of. And how do we know? Tradition tells us Simon of Cyrene becomes a Christian and dies a martyr. Simon of Cyrene's family becomes Christian. His two sons follow the apostles. And it all began with the meeting on Calvary that absolutely upended every one of his plans in life. That Christ, in his suffering and pain, awakened within Simon that desire for living water. And Simon found it, and it satisfied his thirst to such an extent he wasn't even afraid to die for it anymore. You move on to Veronica. Veronica's not mentioned in the Gospels, but we know she was there. Number one, because this tradition goes back that far to the very beginnings, but also because the veil of Veronica, we still have it. It's actually in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. It's in one of the, very interesting, in a side kind of safe chapel room in one of the pillars. And every now and then they do take it out, but very seldom. You have to know where to look. But Veronica's there, and she's by herself. So who is this Veronica then? She has to have some knowledge of who he is, or else she would definitely not be in that procession on her own. And she would not have done what she did if she did not have some inkling of who this is that's being crucified. There's a tradition that goes back to before the 3rd century even, that Veronica is not unknown to Christ. If you rewind back in time a little bit, remember when Christ is going through the village, it says, and the crowds are pressing upon him, and he turns around and says, "Who touched me?" The disciples, "Well, people all around you. What do you mean, who touched you?" Jesus says, "No, someone touched me, and healing power went from me to them. Who was it?" And he turns around and he stares right at her, and it was you. There was a woman who had hemorrhages for 12 years who was cured immediately. Her faith in Christ is that great that even to touch the hem of his garment, she believes it will cure, and it does. The tradition is that that's Veronica. This is why she's there. This is why she knows who he is. This is why she does what she does, because she knows he's the Son of God, at least within her understanding. And so she makes a major fashion faux pas. She takes her veil off in a crowd. Especially, we know she's probably a widow, too, on top of that. So this is huge. And not only that, but she steps out in the face of Roman soldiers and a crowd who is jeering and spitting to wipe off the face of the one convicted to die. What kind of courage would that take? You're risking everything now. Whatever good name you had left, whatever friends you had left, whatever business connections you had left, you've now basically thrown in the garbage because you are treating him as if he deserves anything other than death. You don't be kind to people like that. There's a reason why he looks how he looks, because that's how we want him to look. The last thing you should do is try to clean him up. But she does this. Steps off from her crowd in front of everybody, takes her own veil off, and wipes his face. And that image of his holy face, the devotion to the holy face, actually, those pictures you see, they say that's taken from the image that was left on Veronica's veil. This is what she saw. And so again, these two stations are important because in both of those, it happens that Christ had awakened within those two people at some point the desire for living water. And when it was awakened within them, there was no cost that was too high to pay. Simon pays with his own life. Veronica puts everything she owns and her whole entire reputation on the line just to wipe his face. That desire for living water also brought courage and fidelity, removed the fear of what could happen or what others are going to think. They didn't care at that point. Veronica, least of all, had no concern whatsoever what other people thought. And so, in this whole situation, we see even in those moments of torment and pain and trial, Christ is still desiring those souls to be saved, desiring to draw people to himself. And that's what happens. And so, in our part, as we're going through this Lent, we have to ask ourselves, do I have the courage to live my faith like they did? Am I afraid of what other people are going to say? Am I afraid of what other people are going to think? How they're going to treat me afterwards? What is holding me back? And Christ is calling to us to be a part of this walk up Calvary because he's doing it every single day in our lives. Every single day he carries that cross again for us. Every single day he looks for us to stand with him as Simon of Cyrene did. Every single day he looks for us to at least come forward with our love and sacrifice and prayer and at least clean some of the blood off his face that's there because of what I've done. Every day he waits again. And sometimes nobody comes. And so let us not let that occasion slide or slip away from us.